Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we light a small olive lamp and step into a softer Greece, where marble glows like moonlit milk and the sea breathes in its sleep. What if thunder isn't just noise, but someone taking notes in the sky? If you could visit Mount Olympus for one night, which door would you open first? The shaded courtyard of wisdom, or the quick-footed hallway of messages? Settle in, let the lamp keep watch. If the underworld is less terror and more a quiet fairy home, what else might the myths be gently right about? If Cozy Story helps you drift off, please subscribe, tap like, and leave a gentle comment. Your support keeps the journey continues. Breathe in, breathe out, and let the questions open the path. Picture a room that has learned how to be quiet. The shutters rest at an angle just wide enough for a ribbon of night air. A moth performs a slow, thoughtful orbit around an olive oil lamp, its flame no taller than a thumb, its light the colour of warm honey tipped onto wood. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a dog rearranges its dreams. Closer in, a clay cup leaves a faint ring on the table, as if it too wants to sign the guest book of this hour. We begin here, not with thunder, not with roaring sea, but with a light you could carry in one hand. Greek mythology is famous for spectacle, but it lives most naturally at this scale. A pool of lamplight, a voice that doesn't hurry, the promise of stories that know how to tuck you in. Myth, in the ancient sense, is less a headline than a hearth. It's a way of explaining a world that arrives every morning fully furnished with wind and wheat and temperamental tides, and that slips every evening into a soft shawl of stars. The Greeks told these stories at festivals and in temples, in theatres where masks amplified feeling like seashells amplify the sea, and also at ordinary tables where bread wore a dusting of flour like a fresh snowfall, and figs cooled in a bowl that kept yesterday's scent. Myths answered questions that are older than language. Why does the olive tree thrive on this ridge? Why do storms come the day we need the sea to be polite? Why do we feel brave in the morning and hesitant at dusk? Science, centuries later, offers its facts. Myth offers company. And in the sleepy arithmetic of night, company is often the kindest truth. You might imagine a figure settling onto the bench beside you, someone with a voice made for courtyards, the kind that swells in confidence when the moon climbs and shrinks when the rooster clears its throat. In this telling, heroes do not stomp. They simply arrive, dust their sandals, and accept a cup. Gods do not throw tantrums. They manage the weather like administrators with a sense of drama. Even monsters have their better angles. If you keep the lamp steady and the tone friendly, many of them turn out to be metaphors wearing interesting coats. The aim is not to shrink the stories, but to size them to the hour. We're navigating a long coastline at night, and our craft is built for smooth water. If a wave heaves, we let it pass and look again at the lantern, which keeps its circle of gold without fuss. It helps to think of the myths as room-by-room guidance for living in a world that is both obvious and mysterious. There is a room for beginnings, where chaos is not menace but blank canvas. A room for weather, where thunder has opinions. A room for bread and harvest, where patience turns into grain. A room for travel, where sailors count stars like coins. A room for counsel, where God and humans sit at opposite sides of a table and talk like neighbours who share a hedge of laurel. The doorways between these rooms are thresholds. Thresholds ask for care. We'll linger at each one, letting our eyes adjust as if stepping from sunlight to shade. There is no rush. That is our first promise, and perhaps our most important one. The stories waited a few thousand years for tonight. They don't mind waiting an extra minute while you settle your shoulders against the cushion and let your breath find an even gait. In the old evenings, when a household gathered, someone tended the lamp by pinching the wick and feeding it a quiet sip of oil. A child might fetch water, an elder might fold the day's worries like linens pressed and set aside. The dog out front might practice being important. Then the storyteller began, not with once upon a time, but with a world already moving, a sea already breathing, a mountain already wearing its crown of cloud. The storyteller did not ask for belief the way a law asks for obedience. They asked for attention the way a garden asks for morning light. We can copy that posture. You do not need to believe that a god is listening at the window. It is sufficient to recognise that generations of people shaped their days with these tales, and by listening to them we inherit, not the thunderbolts perhaps, but the gentle, practical wisdom that remains after the noise goes home. Consider the lamp itself, its clay body baked to a quiet strength by hands that knew how long a kiln must hum. The wick rests like a sleepy reed. The flame makes soft friends with the surrounding air. In the mythology to come, fire is not purely a blaze, but a civilization of small, useful lights. Hearths, beacons, votive candles that remember your vow, the travelling coal you lend a neighbour who arrives with a smile and an empty jar. If a god's gift sometimes causes trouble, it's not because the gift is wicked. It's because gifts require tending. So does the mind. Tonight, we will tend your mind the way a careful host tends an ember, shifting it slightly, giving it space, guarding it so it warms but does not scorch. If the occasional spark rises, we'll watch it ascend like a tiny, joyful messenger, and then we'll return to the steady flame that knows how to stay. Hospitality, Xenia, is a central value of the old world, and we adopt it as our guiding manner. The stories will serve water before they serve names. Strangeness is welcomed, seated, offered bread. Only then do we ask questions. In the telling that follows, you are the honoured guest. Your travelling dust is not scolded. A basin waits with gentle water. A wool throw sits nearby in case the knight decides to be too clever. The gods, who cherish courteous thresholds, might pass by to peer in and nod. If you feel a sudden calm when a sentence ends just right, that's probably Hermes setting the cadence like a good drummer. If you find your shoulders settle when we speak of grain, that's Demeter, who believes in supper. If some puzzle unties itself without fanfare, Athena has likely walked through your thoughts, wearing quiet sandals and leaving no footprints except the improved arrangement of chairs. What is the tone we keep? Warm, certainly. Reassuring, like a friend who whispers that even complicated problems can be sorted given a table, a pencil, and a slice of bread. Gently amused, too, because living is frequently improbable, and humans have always met improbability with stories that wear both wisdom and a smile. We will keep danger at a respectful distance. When the old myths grow sharp, we will tilt them so the edges catch the light but not your skin. A lion may pass, but it will pad by in profile, as if on its way to an appointment that does not involve us. A storm may mumble in the distance, but we'll tighten the shutters with an unhurried hand and talk a moment longer about laurel crowns and well-balanced oars. Think of this as the kindly director's cut, where the commentary points out craftsmanship and the camera lingers on pots, tapestries, sandals, and the path that leads safely home. If we are to stay, truly stay, in the company of these myths, we must give our senses something to hold. So here are our touchstones. Straw that rustles like paper being folded. Wool with the faint, clean smell of sunshine. The cool rim of a ceramic cup steady against your lip. Olive wood polished by years of fingers, wearing a shine you cannot fake. The chalky whisper of limestone under sandals. The faint pepper of crushed laurel leaves, which linger on a fingertip as though memory itself could be scented. And the sea, always the sea, which in Greek stories is less a backdrop than a character, sometimes cranky, sometimes generous, always narrating in its endless syllables of foam. When you need to rest your mind, choose one of these, put it in your pocket, bring it out when the sentence lengthens and your breath lengthens with it. What is a myth but a metaphor that refuses to stay on the page? Zeus, often remembered as thunder in a well-tailored cloak, can just as easily be read as the weather that leaders pretend to control. Hera, who cares about vows with an archivist's practicality, stands for the simple power of our promises. Athena is not simply war's strategist. She is the quiet voice that enumerates options, appreciates good stitching, and suggests you bring a second plan just in case. Apollo is the shining certainty that music and measure share a balcony. Artemis, the cool dignity of wild spaces that offer you room when a day has been too crowded. Hermes is timing, which is to say, luck with manners. Aphrodite is the warmth that reminds you your skin is also a mind. Hephaestus is craft, the oddly satisfying ring of made well. Dionysus is laughter that doesn't bully. Read them as gods, yes, and also as household verbs. In doing so, the myths stand up from the marble and sit a little nearer, ready to be useful again. Even the famous heroes shrink and glow in the lamp's circle, revealing the practical tasks that sit beneath their epics. Heracles repaired straps and learned, possibly the hard way, that persistence includes breaks. Perseus mastered reflective surfaces and polite borrowing. Theseus carried thread and remembered to say thank you, which, if you've ever been lost in a maze of your own thinking, is not a bad plan. Odysseus, the patron saint of let's think about that for a second, demonstrates that knowing the knot and knowing the mood of a crew are related skills. When we revisit their paths, we will not count heads or victories. We will count packed lunches, tied sandals, checked weather, and the letters home that explain gently that delays happen and supper should be kept warm. To be heroic, it turns out, is to be a good traveller with an honest itinerary. Some might ask, why tell these tales at bedtime? Isn't night for forgetting? Exactly so. Myths, true to their generous natures, help you set down the day. They file its papers without complaint. They put a hand out when a thought tries to run another lap. They hum you past the busier intersections, and they give you a pocket-sized map for tomorrow. When you wake, you won't recall every image with museum clarity. You might simply remember that patience tastes like bread, that courage rustles like a cloak worn lightly, that kindness sounds like a stool pulled out for a stranger. You might recall a god as the feeling of good timing, or a hero as the sensation of tightening a knot just right. That is enough. The myths are satisfied with lingering in your gestures, which is where they have done their best work for millennia. To begin, then, is to pass a threshold. The Greeks honoured thresholds. They garlanded doors and set small household shrines near the place where inside turns to out. We honour ours by adjusting your pillow, checking the lamp, and placing a sprig of laurel where the night air can find it. We will not fling the door open to the storm. We will invite a breeze. We will not call the gods like a crowd calls for an encore. We will let them decide to visit, which they often do when the room is orderly and the wine is properly watered. One gentle joke while we tidy. The gods, like good neighbours, have been known to appear precisely when you've just finished sweeping. Preparation attracts luck. The myths have been saying that, in different costumes, for a very long time. There is a pleasure in leaning into oldness. Words that have travelled through so many mouths come to your ear polished and oddly light. You can turn them, examine their smoothness, and set them down without feeling burdened. The tales have outlived changes in governments, fashions, recipes, and map edges. They have persisted because they are not merely entertainment, they are memory aids for the human condition. Our sleep-friendly approach refuses to sand away their meaning, but it does buff the corners. Where the ground once bristled with thorns, you will now find a path lined with thyme that releases a friendly scent when you brush against it. The objects remain: the lyre, the loom, the oar, the laurel. The gestures remain: the welcome, the vow, the glance upward for guidance. The heat remains where it matters, in the hearth, in the cup, in the kindness. We will walk with a cadence the body recognises. Short step, long step. Short thought, longer thought that follows. A sentence that arrives like a small wave, and then another that glides farther up the sand. Your breath, noticing the pattern, will oblige by matching it. You may find, pleasantly, that meaning continues to arrive even as the muscles around your eyes decide they'd like to practice the ancient art of closing. That's fine. The gods do not demand perfect attendance. In many temples, a whisper counted as a prayer. Tonight, a half-heard sentence counts as a blessing. If you drift, the stories keep walking without you, and they will meet you again where you rejoin them. This is not a test. It is an evening stroll. Outside the window, if you listen, the night arranges its orchestra. A cricket keeps time with a metronome's reliable vanity. Leaves answer one another in the gentlest argument imaginable. A distant oar slips and lifts, as if the sea were learning a new and very quiet dance. The moon works its old trick of making every white wall seem cleaner than it was, which is a service many households have appreciated. In this suite of sounds, the voice of myth arrives as a middle instrument, content to harmonise. It's not the trumpet or the drum. It's the wooden flute that you almost mistake for a breeze until the melody repeats, and you realise something is being said, and kindly. When the myths speak of virtue, and they do, constantly in linens of every weave, they usually place it in an object or a gesture. Wisdom is shade on a square made for thinking. Courage is the weight of a hand steadying a prow. Justice is a scale that, even when you can't see it, you sense is there clicking to balance. Love is warmth that doesn't burn the bread. Faithfulness is a long walk taken at the promised pace. The abstract becomes tactile because the body understands better when given something to touch. In our telling, that tactility is the sleepy bridge between the story and your rest. You hold the edge of a cloak between finger and thumb. It is enough to keep you here, and that here is soft. The lamp, meanwhile, requires no convincing that it is central. Its small intelligence is perfect. It brightens when encouraged, softens when asked. There's a lesson in that, somewhere among the philosophers, but tonight we nod to the lesson and let it pass like a polite cat. Instead, we note how every myth we'll meet has its own lamp. Some are bright and public, lifted in temples or carried to theatres where crowds breathe together. Some are private, sheltered in kitchens and carried to doorways to check for returning footsteps. Some are tucked into travelling baskets, wrapped in wool so the coal keeps its secret. Ours is a courtyard lamp, trustworthy, fond of company, good at listening. If you look at it long enough, it becomes a small sun on a short orbit, rising whenever you strike the wick and setting whenever you stop needing to see. Before we set off, we make a compact with our own attention. We will not chase digressions the way a puppy chases a sleeve. We will let our minds stretch but not sprint. If a detail insists on being admired, a carved handle on a kylix, a ripple in a bronze mirror, the pattern in a woven band, we'll admire it, then move on, taking the calm with us. There's joy in noticing without collecting. The ancients enjoyed that kind of joy. They built stowers for walking and thinking, theatres for listening and breathing, altars for pausing and remembering. We'll borrow their architecture and arrange it inside the hour. It will fit the way a well-folded cloak fits in a travel sack already full of just enough. You might wonder where the laughter lives in all this quiet. It lives where it has always lived, in timing. When Hermes holds the door just a second longer than expected, and the breeze says, "Thank you," by lifting the edge of your sleeve. When a philosopher tries to define everything before breakfast and the baker simply hands him a roll, and both of them are right in different ways. When a god appears disguised as a stranger, and, upon being given a stool and a cup, smiles the smile of someone who enjoys being recognised for their manners rather than their thunder. These are soft jokes, the kind that tuck a blanket a little higher. We're not here to rattle the shutters, we're here to make the house seem sturdy, which, spoiler, it is. In a moment, the stories themselves will form their procession. They will carry the objects that matter. A lyre like a boat with strings for oars, a spindle that hums, a tune engineers claim is silence, a laurel branch freshly snapped, still releasing that peppery whisper. They will nod to the sea, to the mountains, to the fields, to the city squares where words and bread share a schedule. You will recognise them. Even if the names feel new, their shapes are familiar. You've met courage before in your own smaller journeys. You've met hospitality when someone opened a door and made it look as though the house had been waiting just for you. You've met wonder whenever the moon remembered to rise at the end of a hard day. Myths simply gather these meetings under a single lamp and invite you to notice them. So we arrive at last at the quiet threshold of the series. The light is ready. The cup is filled just enough. The night has taken up its post, willing to be patient while we take a few steps along the colonnade of memory. If sleep visits you early, that's fine. The gods commend good timing. If you stay, we'll stroll together by this lamp to the first doorway where the world begins, not with noise, but with space. Even then, the lamp will come with us, keeping its round, friendly promise. I will show you just enough, and then, kindly, I will dim. For now, sit back, fold the day as if it were a linen laid smooth, and breathe. 4 in, 6 out, or any rhythm that pleases your sea. The stories are near. The laurel sprig leans in the vase, dignified, perfectly itself. The clay cup is cool against your palm, and the olive oil lamp holds its small, steady sun. We begin as the ancients began, by honouring the light that lets a story be seen and the quiet that lets it be heard. When we return to this room at the end, we will find it waiting as we left it. The pool of gold on the table, the soft scent of crushed leaves, the moth circling less urgently now, as if even wings can learn a slower beat. The lamp keeps the promise, and in its circle, so do we. Step outside with the lamp cupped in your hand and hold it up to the night. Beyond its honey-coloured circle, the darkness looks wide and undecided, as if the world hasn't finished choosing its furniture. That wide, undecided feeling is close to what the Greeks meant by chaos, not a tantrum of flying chairs, but an open gap, a polite emptiness with no floors laid down yet. Think of a courtyard before the stones are set, chalk lines traced where the path will be. In that softness, you can already sense where the garden beds might go, where the bench would please the afternoon, where a fig tree could throw good shade. Chaos is the room before the room. It is silence that has not yet remembered which song it wants to hum. From this generous blank, shapes arrive like guests who don't knock because the door is still being built. First comes Gaia, the earth, not a ball in the void, but the dependable ground beneath bare feet. She is the sturdy grain of limestone, the patient curve of hill, the valley that remembers water even when the stream has wandered for the season. She is the comfort of a place you can sit without falling through. If you press your palm to a sun-warmed stone, you're greeting her in her preferred language. Then the sky remembers itself and takes the name Uranos, a blue vault stretched tenderly above, cool in the morning, velvet at night, a ceiling so tall you can never bump your head on it. Between them, a breeze begins keeping the simplest calendar. Dawn, noon, dusk, and the hour when lamps catch. From their nearness rise the small familiars that make a world sociable. Mountains lift like folded blankets someone stored at the edge of the horizon. Rivers begin to practice sentences, deciding whether they prefer to speak in long clauses or short, persuasive phrases. Springs leap out of stone with the cheerful certainty of a friend arriving early, their water carrying the faint metallic promise of later bread. The sea, first a rumour at the edge of thinking, steps forward and takes the name Pontus, which sounds like it could be said with a respectful nod across a harbour. It breathes in long, repeating lines and lays a cool hand on the weather when tempers warm. If chaos was a blank parchment, Gaia and Uranos are the first clean lines in a letter. Night too receives a name it has always wanted, Nyx, and she moves like a curtain drawn with care. In her company walks Erebos, the hush within hush, and from them, in time, comes day, Hemera, whose footsteps have a briskness you can set your chores by. Dawn and twilight. You might know them as rosy-fingered and saffron-robed from later poets. Learn their timing the way children learn to pass bowls at a table, reliably, with small, proud glances toward the adults who smile at each success. When Breeze gets opinions, it divides into 4 familiar voices: Boreas, who keeps winter tidy, Notos, who remembers rain, Eurus, who fidgets, and Zephyrus, who knows how to be charming without showing off. When you hear cloth snap on a line in a sudden gust, that's the winds seating themselves, each to a corner, like cousins who've agreed to be pleasant for dinner. So far, everything is arrangement, placement, the kind of gentle order that makes a house feel both shaped and alive. The Greeks had a word for that: cosmos. Not just universe, but order with a sense of beauty, the way a well-set table pleases the eye before a single bite is taken. The myths, even when they later grow dramatic, keep returning to this first habit of the world. Things belonging where they are welcomed, and belonging making them beautiful. A stonemason understands this when he turns a block until its face meets the wall's grain with a sigh of fit. A potter knows it when a cup comes off the wheel with a lip that wants to kiss the drinker's mouth. In the beginning, the universe is full of such moments of rightness, stacking themselves quietly into a space we can walk. Between earth and sky there is a closeness that, like all closeness, asks for renegotiation now and then. It would be unkind to call it conflict. It's more like the sky finding it has leaned too long on the windowsill and the earth kindly clearing her throat. In one telling, their children, tall, thoughtful beings the later world would call Titans, help broker better boundaries. Oceanus, who prefers a perimeter, offers to keep things contained. Hyperion, fond of light, recommends schedules. Themis, who loves fairness the way a baker loves even slices, drafts guidelines. In the version we can sleep by, what might have been a quarrel becomes a household meeting with tea, and eventually a plan. The sky lifts, a little higher. The earth breathes a little easier. Mornings stop arriving late. The first architecture of distance appears, not separation as loneliness, but space that allows growing things to grow. When boundaries improve, names multiply. Hills that were merely hills acquire nicknames locals would fight for. Rivers gain personalities you could write letters to. A shepherd, leaning on his staff near a spring that insists on singing, decides it must belong to a small goddess who enjoys staying in one place, and he thanks her for the clean cup. A fisherman, noticing how the sea changes its mind 3 times in an afternoon, offers a quiet word to someone he calls simply Old Man of the Sea, and promises to be generous with bait. These courtesies become habits. Habits ferment into myths, which are simply courtesies that learn to speak in longer sentences. And because the Greeks had good manners where praise is concerned, they tell and retell these stories until the world around them feels spoken for, blessed by association. Time itself, which up to this point has been content to drift like a drowsy boat, finds a better posture. 2 ways of counting emerge. There is Chronos, the tick-tock of days and lampwick inches, bread that needs exactly this long to rise and no longer. And there is Kairos, the right moment, the feel of now, when 2 edges meet sweetly, the instant you know to nudge the loaf into the oven, or fold the cloak before the dew decides to be confident. Later ages turn these into metaphors and indignant schedules. In the beginning they exist under your fingers and in your chest, teaching you the tempo of a world that appreciates both patience and poise. As the world fits itself together, other presences take their seats. The Moirai, the Fates, arrive with the air of artisans who know their craft and prefer simple lighting. One draws out the thread, another measures, the third snips. Never hurried, never cruel, just convinced that clean work is a form of kindness. If you've ever watched an elder untangle yarn with a patience that shames chaos back into string, you have visited their workshop. Nearby sit the Charites, the Graces, who hang garlands where thresholds need encouragement, and remind serious people that beauty is a form of clarity. The Muses gather without fanfare in places where language wants to stand on tiptoe. A hillside with decent acoustics, a shadowed room with a lyre waiting, a harbour where ropes creak in a pleasing key. They do not demand, they suggest, which is both subtler and more effective. You might think, where are the sharp edges, the famous storms? For tonight, let them stay folded. When old tellings mention roughness, we'll soften them into the kind of stories that repair rather than startle. For instance, the old tension between generations, the sky, the earth, their towering children, is often told with iron and injury. In our lamplight it becomes more like the world learning to give itself room, slowly discovering that closeness without breathing space makes tempers short. The lesson holds without the clamour. Love often improves when the chairs are arranged so everyone can see the hearth. Soon, with space agreed upon, the day becomes an orderly procession. Morning steps in with a basket of tasks and a list that smells faintly of time. Midday sits squarely on the world like a cat convinced of its importance. Evening counts the day's coins and fines to everyone's relief that they add up. Night tidies the room, tucks in the corners, and asks softly whether a story would help. You can almost hear the first calendar being sketched, not yet written in wax or carved in stone, but visible as a rhythm in the chest, as dependable as the bakery's door opening at the same time every morning. The first festivals are just sighs of gratitude that grew large enough to fill a square. The sea, that patient teacher, learns its neighbourhood. It keeps to its bowl with the dignity of someone who knows their place and is proud of it. Waves arrive in phrases you begin to understand. There is the hello wave that makes a shore look alive. There is the consider this wave that tugs a boat to remind the crew we share the road. There is the good night wave that lays its head along the sand and hums a lullaby. Sailors, who are also poets when no one is looking, begin to read their own thoughts in the water's handwriting, finding comfort in a language bigger than any one village. Plants take their positions and begin their secret work. Olive trees lift their silver-green leaves like polite hands, volunteering for centuries of service. Vines learn the precise art of leaning on what's nearby without strangling it, which is its own philosophy. Grain practices patience, hiding most of its magic underground until the exact hour when the stalks decide, in a kind group text, to ripen. Fig trees keep their delightful habit of being both shade and dessert. Laurel rehearses dignified nodding. Bay leaves memorize sources by heart. With each sprout the world says, again, walk here. And with each harvest it says again, stay. Animals discover their jobs without needing to be told. Goats master the art of being useful and opinionated. Sheep teach humans the therapeutic value of repetitive motion. 1, 2, 3, the wrap of wool around a spindle, the loom shuttle gliding like a careful bird. Dogs naturally take charge of doorways, dream management, and the sort of moral support that looks like companionship and is. Birds, sparrows, swallows, little bursts of punctuation, pepper the air with commentary. Owls keep the night oiled and in good working order. Dolphins commit to joy as a maritime policy. Even the imagined creatures, the ones that will later flex under bolder lanterns, find their kinder versions here. A bull with a gentle step, a horse that loves the horizon without insisting on distance. Under all this, the earth remembers to be generous with colour and texture. Clay waits in banks along the river for hands to make it speak. Stone offers itself to builders who can think in arches and shade. Reed grows in places where wind likes to dream, then lends itself to baskets that make markets feel organised. If you listen closely as a city begins to happen, you can hear a low conversation among materials and intentions. "Hold me here," says the arch. "Believe I can carry this," says the beam. "Leave a window," says the human heart, "so a breeze can tell me what time it is." And the world, newly walkable, answers by fitting pieces together with the quiet authority of a well-made chair. As the world grows used to its shape, people begin to practice the naming that makes things friendlier. A mountain is simply a mountain until someone, after a successful journey, says its name aloud to a friend and discovers the name tastes like victory and time. A brook is merely running water until someone, pausing to refill a flask, notices the pattern of sun on its back and decides that pattern deserves a story. A harbour is just a curve in the coastline until a mother waves at a returning boat and the curve becomes a cradle that rocks the worry out of her shoulders. The act of naming is the act of noticing, and noticing is the first liturgy. In the lull between evening chores and lamplight settling, a storyteller might sit and gesture at the whole arrangement with a piece of bread. "We live," they might say, "in a place that learned to be kind to feet." That is the essence of this section. The change from wide, courteous emptiness to a world that agrees to be visited without complaint. Paths offer themselves. Stones lie flat where flatness would help. Trees hold out shade like hosts holding out cups. Even the stars, which might easily have been aloof, descend into constellations that behave like good neighbours, recognisable, dependable, convenient when you've lost your way in a story and need to point and say, "There, that one," to anchor your tale. You can feel, in the soft machinery of the beginning, the first rules of comfort settling in. Things should return, morning after night, tide after ebb, bread after flour. Things should fit, door in frame, foot on step, hand to tool. Things should speak plainly when they can, storm announcing itself with a smell, harvest with a hush of golden heads, friendship with a chair pulled out so there's no question where you should sit. Out of these rules grows a world whose logic you can sleep in. The myths, by laying this foundation, put mattresses under your thoughts. If the older, louder traditions tell you that the shift from titans to the next generation involved clamour, let's translate. What the world wanted, it turns out, was not bigness but balance. The large presences that held the room at first, mountain large, river large, horizon large, had done noble work. But as houses joined into towns and towns into cities with theatres and markets, the world needed gods who could thread needles as well as steer seasons. It needed wisdom that could sit at a kitchen table and help count coins, music that could time kneading, justice that could fit in the space between two neighbours' doorways. The next presences, those you'll meet soon on their Cloudsoft mountain and in their hospitable workshops, arrive not to erase what came before but to detail it, the way a careful artisan adds handles to an already excellent cup. For now, it's enough to notice the quiet completeness of a world that has remembered doors and paths, seasons and stars. On a morning in this newly walkable place, someone steps outside with a broom and pauses a moment to listen. They hear the kind of silence that isn't empty but full. The murmur of bees editing a sentence of time, the polite knock of a neighbour whose shadow arrives before their hand, the distant beat of oars negotiating with a patient sea. They sweep not because the threshold is dirty, but because sweeping is a way of agreeing with the day. The bristles make a soft, convincing music. The first story of the morning isn't spoken, it's performed. A room made ready for company. And at night, when the same someone leans the broom back in its corner and lights the lamp, the beginning we've been speaking of gathers itself into a feeling under the ribs. You know where things are now. You could walk from the door to the fig tree without stumbling, even if the moon decided to play shy. You could find the cup in the dark by the memory of its weight. You could, with the gentlest frown, remember where the laurel sprig leans in its jar and go there without looking. That is what the Greeks gave themselves by telling this tale, a map drawn in manners and objects as much as in lines and names. It's a pleasant thought, too, that the earliest prayers may have sounded like compliments to good design. Thank you, someone might have said, for rivers that don't forget downhill, for winds that take turns, for stones that stack, for bread that converts patience into flavour. The gods, sensitive to praise done properly, would have nodded and continued with their tasks, rotating day and night like partners at a dance, teaching waves how not to surprise small boats, coaxing vines to learn architecture from the trellis and not the other way around. If a small joke slips in here, well, it does seem the world prefers a planner who can also throw a party. As we close this section, bring the lamp a little closer and watch how its circle gives shape to what it touches. Over there, the curl of bread left from supper. Here, the lip of the cup catching light like a moon in pottery. The world began with an invitation to notice, and it remains hospitable to noticing. Tomorrow we'll walk into rooms with more voices in them, gods who have learned to speak in human volumes, heroes who pack their bags with thread and thank yous, but it all rests on this, an emptiness that became generous, a formlessness that became a floor plan, a sky that lifted so the earth could exhale, and an earth that, in exhaling, made space for doorways. Set the lamp down, feel how the table receives it with an old friend's ease. The night outside is not so undecided now. It has adopted the shape of your courtyard, your tree, your step. The beginning has done its work. The world is walkable, and because it is walkable, it is tellable. You can close your eyes if you like. Tomorrow will know where to find you, and the path to morning will be the same one you took this evening, only in the other direction, under the same reliable sky. And when you wake, you will know, without thinking, where the laurel is, where the cup is, and how many steps it takes to reach the door, because the world, once wide and shy, has drawn its own map around you and promised, in the courteous grammar of beginnings, to keep its furniture where you can find it. Imagine a mountain that has learned hospitality. Clouds fold back like curtains, and the air smells faintly of cold stone warmed by sun. Somewhere a stream stitches silver through moss, and near the summit the wind writes tidy calligraphy along the edges of snow. This is Olympus as we'll keep it tonight. Not a thunder stage, but a high, bright household. The doors are open, the rooms are many, and while the gods are still themselves, luminous, large, occasionally opinionated, they move with the unhurried grace of people who know where the cups live and how to keep a pantry civilized. The hallway is a colonnade of weather. On a small table by the entrance sits a ledger with a bronze clasp, its pages scented faintly of smoke and rain. Zeus keeps this book. He's not a growl in the sky tonight, but a caretaker of balance who prefers order to spectacle. You could imagine him tapping the page with a reed pen, making small notes in a neat hand, a clean thunder for the hills next Thursday, a friendly shower for the wheat. Please, for the sake of the olive harvest, let the wind remember restraint. When he lifts the pen, you hear the softest whisper of storm far away, the dignified throat clearing of a sky that intends to behave. He smiles the smile of someone who likes a well-run schedule and a table set squarely. If a bolt must fly, it will be a reminder, not a tantrum, a straight line written in light. A doorway opens to a courtyard that enjoys shade at the exact hour Thinking likes to visit. This is Athena's place. The floor is swept. The chair legs sit level. The olive tree nearby keeps its counsel. On a low table, a small map waits beside a piece of chalk and a sprig of bay. Athena's wisdom in this telling has calluses. It has known the weight of a shield and the satisfaction of well-stitched sandals. It keeps a second plan folded beneath the first, not because it is anxious, but because foresight is simply good manners. Her owl perches in the beam above, content with silence until the question truly needs a sound. If you bring a problem here, Athena warms it with attention the way sunlight warms a stone, and you feel pathways appear you hadn't realised were there. Sometimes she hums, nothing elaborate, just a thread of melody that suggests the loom nearby is ready to help. There is music in the next room before you notice instruments. Apollo has tuned the air. It is the kind of tuning that makes even the wooden table feel melodic. The floor holds a patient grid of light and shadow as if the sun itself approves. Strings rest. A kithara leans like a polite guest. A lyre waits with a curve just right for hands that know how to be careful. Apollo's presence is clarity without glare. He holds medicine like a pitcher of fresh water and poetry, like a window someone has finally opened. The rhythm here is steady enough to pace a day by, lines measured not to confine feeling but to carry it safely across. If you step wrong, the room forgives you. If you step right, you feel the click of cadence, that small happiness when a foot finds its note. A gentle joke lives in his eyebrows. Yes, perfection exists, and no, we won't let it ruin a perfectly good song. Follow the scent of pine and cold shade down a corridor that grows quiet on purpose. Artemis keeps her room on the edge of the house, where the mountain tips into forest. Her door opens to night paths and breath that fogs a little, even in summer. The floor is clean of ornaments. A bow rests beside a bundle of linen. The walls remember birdsong. She's the patron of distances that soothe, of spaces that teach your lungs their own patience. If the city has been too noisy, Artemis presses a cool palm to your forehead, and the noise folds itself into the kind of silence that has room for a brook, for a fox for you. The moon visits her here, pouring silver into a clay cup left always on the sill. She drinks and says nothing because sometimes calm does more work than counsel. A scatter of sandals next door announces Hermes, who has a way of arriving a breath before you think to look up. His room is a crossroads dressed like a workshop, travel sticks, a wall of clever bags, scales that know how to be fair in a hurry, letters bound in ribbon. The ceiling seems slightly lower here, not oppressively but cosily, as if lowering your head to pass through reminds you to be nimble. Hermes is timing with good shoes on. He makes sure news steps out when news is due and that lost things remember the path home. He enjoys a door that swings just so, and he is famously polite to thresholds. If your day has been 1 second off, he will put it back in joint with the same satisfaction a clockmaker feels at a watch that starts to sing. He laughs often, not at you but with the overall idea of movement, which he finds charming. On a balcony that faces warm water, a breeze lifts the edge of a curtain, and the room breathes in a little. Aphrodite keeps a mirror here, but it is a gentle one, the kind that reflects your best angle first and lets you find the others at your own pace. Bowls of pomegranate and fig wait on a low table, and oil scented with myrtle sleeps in a small stoppered jar. She's not a storm of roses tonight, not a demand, but warmth, correctly portioned. Enough to remind you the body's a fine invention, not so much that the mind forgets its chair. She arranges affection the way a host arranges cushions, intentionally, with an eye to comfort and conversation. If your heart has been running around the room, she catches it lightly by the sleeve and hands it a sip of water. In her company, compliments acquire manners, and desire learns to wait long enough to listen. Along the back of the house runs a kitchen that never seems to cool. Demeter is at the bench, sleeves rolled, forearms dusted with flour like an early snowfall. The room smells of yeast and patience. On hooks hang herbs that have opinions. In baskets rest grains that remember rain. By the window a child's cup sits ready, because Demeter keeps a child's portion in mind even when nobody asks. She knows every useful thing the earth can become when treated with ritual and respect. If you lean near, she will show you how to fold dough until it remembers itself. Her voice is the cadence of harvest talk at dusk, simple sentences that hold a day together. When she smiles, the cupboard somehow looks fuller, and you understand the old truth with your nose as much as your mind. Bread is a way the world keeps its promises. From the kitchen, a small door leads to a workshop that glows like a coal under bellows. Hephaestus lives here among anvils that look older than they are and tools that fit the hand as if the hand invented them. Sparks leap up like polite fireflies whenever the hammer speaks to metal. It is warmer than the rest of the house, but not in a way that pushes you back. It draws you in. Shelves hold cups whose rims make the lip glad, hinges that consider themselves in the family, lampstands that promise to be steady even if bumped by a drowsy elbow. Hephaestus wears the air of those who have fallen and stood again so often the motion has become expertise. He listens harder than he talks. When he gives you something, it is not a gift so much as a proof that making is a form of affection. If you thank him, he nods and returns to the rhythm that keeps mountains honest. You will notice sooner or later that laughter gathers at the far end of the hall, not thick, not rowdy, but a good-natured current like a festival happening at a reasonable volume. Dionysus hosts there. Vines climb a trellis with admirable restraint, and cups sit ready in two sizes, one for celebration, one for conversation. He understands that joy, like wine, benefits from air and pacing. He is the patron of afternoons that decide to become evenings in order to forgive morning, of dances that allow for 2 left feet and the occasional step away to look at stars. He likes stories with mistaken identities that become true identities, masks that help us find faces, the way a play can tidy grief by letting it sing. If someone begins to be loud, he leans over and with a grin shuffles the moment back into charm. You leave his room lighter and more yourself, which is a practical miracle. Somewhere central and slightly hidden sits a round room you could miss if you walk too quickly. You shouldn't. Hestia keeps this one. The hearth is small and exact. The flame's voice never rises. Everything here has edges softened by kindness. A pot mutters in a domestic language. A stool waits that feels like it remembers the shape of every tired person who ever sat on it. A copper kettle goes a little shy the instant you notice it, and then bravely resumes its hum. Hestia does not call attention. She maintains the temperature at which conversation becomes confiding, and silence becomes permission. In many houses, this is the room where the day earns the right to be called good. In Olympus, it is the axis around which the mountain turns without creak. If you could borrow only one thing from the gods, borrow this room's patience. And what of Poseidon, who prefers horizons? His chambers, when he visits, are on the cliff edge where spray memorizes the air. He brings with him the good authority of tides and the satisfaction of a harbour that knows how to hold. Tonight he is the neighbour who reminds the house that travel is part of living. He keeps the sea from sulking and teaches waves to nod when a small boat asks politely. He leaves shells on the threshold as calling cards and returns to his blue office with the pleasure of a craftsman whose material never stops moving. If you listen, you will hear Ares pass by the outer wall, boots quiet out of respect for sleepers. He has agreed, for the evening, to let courage be steadiness rather than noise. There is work enough for strength in carrying a friend's weight, in holding a gate while others pass, in standing long hours where standing matters. He knows this, even if the knowledge makes him shift in his armour like a man unused to chairs. The house thanks him without words, and he nods, both relieved and a little surprised to be thanked for restraint. The household hums. Small gods you might not name at first glance go about their business with competence. The graces straighten garlands so they look like luck rather than labour. The muses work in the study with the door open, one tapping a finger until a poem finds its steps. another reminding a painter that hands remember what eyes forget, a third teaching a sailor that a good song lengthens oars and shortens miles. The fates, invited as honoured aunts, sit by a window and manage their threads with the calm that makes worry unambitious. Nobody rushes. Even time seems content to take the stairs. You might ask how such a household manages its disagreements. Gently is the answer, and with the help of tea. When Zeus and Hera debate the placement of a vow on a shelf, top where it will be seen, middle where it will be reached, they bring Hestia into the room, and the flame explains itself without speaking. When Hermes argues for speed and Demeter argues for ripeness, Athena pours water into clay cups and reminds both that good timing is usually a team sport. When Apollo's measure and Dionysus's freedom glance at each other with that cousinly challenge, they borrow a courtyard and keep the neighbours entertained until they end up laughing at how beautifully they disagree. The house prefers cooperation to conquest, and that preference is a habit that can be learned. Wander long enough and you will find balconies. Olympus loves a balcony. From one you can watch 3 kinds of weather negotiating peace. From another you can see a shepherd practicing whistled instructions with a patience that would please any god. The balustrades are stone-shaped by hands that like their work. Laurel grows in terracotta, and the pots remember different summers. You stand at one and breathe, and the mountain answers back like a friend across a table. The gods, when not at tasks, lean on these rails and consider their domains not as possessions, but as conversations they have the privilege to join. This is the gentlest secret of Olympus. Divinity, properly held, looks a lot like stewardship. Visitors arrive, of course. Sailors climb with offerings of polished wood and stories about a moon that walked them home. Midwives bring thanks in lavender and lint. Potters come to ask Hephaestus whether a lip should flare a whisper more and leave with the obsession of people who love their craft. Poets come giddy, leave hungry, and eat in Demeter's kitchen until words become good citizens again. Children. There are always children in any place alive. Peer into rooms and find their favourites. One sits very still beside Athena's table and pretends to draft a plan. Another slips into Hermes' doorway and learns the quiet art of not losing things. A third finds Hestia's stool, climbs it with the solemnity of someone discovering altitude, and falls asleep at once, which is the highest praise a hearth understands. In the late afternoon, when the house grows long shadows and bread cools on a rack, someone begins to play in Apollo's room with the window open. The melody finds a corridor and then a courtyard. It climbs a stair and slides down a banister. The notes carry past the forge, where Hephaestus pauses just long enough to grin without breaking rhythm, and into the kitchen, where Demeter taps the side of a bowl with a wooden spoon because every house is a percussion section if you're brave. Hermes catches the tempo, of course, and in less than a minute a letter that would have arrived tomorrow arrives today, which is the sort of thing music can do to schedules. Even Zeus lifts his head from the ledger, and forgetting to be dignified, taps one finger on the clasp. As twilight finds its best angle, the household performs a small ritual that looks suspiciously like ordinary life. Lamps are lit, saucer-bodied, clay, their wicks dressed like tidy thoughts. Garlands are settled on hooks so their shadows look friendly. A door on the forest side is left open the width of a fox, because Artemis likes a breeze with opinions. Someone somewhere remembers a story and begins at a pace that respects ears. Dionysus pours an amount perfectly judged to invite laughter without making chairs misbehave. Hera reshelves a vow that tried to wander. Hermes moves tomorrow's shoes near tomorrow's door. And Hestia, who never tires and never insists, keeps the temperature constant, which is a quiet miracle dressed as housekeeping. You might think, standing in the doorway, that Olympus is larger on the inside than on the outside. You would be right. It is the size of all the rooms in a human life that feel sacred when tended and brittle when ignored. It is the cupboard where you keep the cup someone loved before you. It is the lane that leads to the sea, where you learn to read weather with your face. It is the workbench where a solution appears if you keep your hands moving kindly. It is the chair under the olive tree at an hour when thoughts sit down politely, ask to be heard, and then prove shorter than you feared. What makes this mountain a household and not a museum is the liveliness of small repairs. Promises are checked and mended, tools are sharpened, songs are retuned, bread is cut, visitors are received, departures are blessed. The gods in this version are less causes than companions. They are the verbs behind steadying, ripening, mending, listening, laughing, keeping. They prefer you to learn their ways rather than salute their names. If you hang a sprig of laurel above your door and keep it fresh, they will count that as comprehension. If you speak kindly to a threshold because it has been faithful to your steps, they will call it prayer. And when at last the lamps have decided on their glow and the mountain has agreed to be night, you find your way back through the hall with the sort of accuracy that feels like memory taught to your feet. You pass Dionysus, who offers a final half-smile that means, enough for now. Hephaestus, who stirs the embers until the forge sleeps. Demeter, wrapping bread in linen so morning can remember. Aphrodite, closing the mirror like a book at a good page. Hermes, stacking letters so none are lonely. Artemis, leaning in from the dark to say the stars are behaving. Apollo, setting his instrument gently where it will dream in tune. Athena, making one last chalk mark that tomorrow will understand. Hera, straightening a vow that will hold all night. Zeus, tying the ledger shut with weather already planned for dawn. And Hestia, who does nothing dramatic whatsoever, and in doing so keeps everything from wandering. You step outside with your own small lamp and feel the mountain's breath, cool and generous. The olive leaves whisper in their silver language. The laurel releases that peppery exhale you've begun to recognize as a kind of blessing. The clay cup on your table remembers your hand without needing a reminder. Olympus settles behind you like a well-made cloak. The house with many rooms has taught you what houses teach. Keep promises folded. Keep tools within reach. Keep laughter measured and music nearby. Keep the fire small and sure. And as you draw the light closer, the flame answering your palm with beeswax warmth. The whole bright household seems to nod down the long hallway of sky, its many doors dimming to embers, its one hearth glowing as if it has been here all along, which, quietly, reliably, it has. Begin with the feel of cord between finger and thumb. Twist, pinch, check the knot, breathe. Courage, in these rooms of myth, is a texture before it is a trumpet. It's a strap pulled snug over a shoulder, the familiar rasp of leather settling where bone knows it will sit all day. It's the weight of a pack tested once, twice, then adjusted so it rests on the useful part of the back and not the wishful part. Heroes, in this gentler telling, do not spring fully formed into thunder. They lace their sandals and remember to bring lunch. The air at the doorway smells of linen and a little oil. The sea beyond the lane breathes like a big animal that has agreed to be polite. You check the small knife at your belt, you pat the side of the flask, you make sure the letter to your mother is tucked under the jar so she'll find it when she goes to water the laurel. Then you go. Heracles leaves like this despite his famous bigness. He was not born carrying the world, he learned to carry what he must. In the quiet hours before he sets out, he sits with a strap in his hands and rubs beeswax into it until it stops arguing. He wraps the hilt of his club with cloth so his palms will end the day as hands, not torn maps. He thinks about the sun, the route, the places along the way where a creek keeps its promise. This is a man many stories have tried to make into a storm, but watch him here and you'll see careful weather. He repeats the day's plans softly, not to himself, because that might feel like boasting, but to the grain in the wooden door. The door understands. The door has seen mornings. On the road, labour does not roar. It arrives in the shape of tasks that could be mistaken for housekeeping if you didn't look twice. Move this, mend that, outweight the temper of a creature the world has been stepping around for too long. If some beasts are sharp tonight, their edges are folded in cloth. We will say simply that obstacles existed, and that Heracles had the patience to become their neighbour before he asked them to please stop blocking the path. His great strength is not only in his arms, but in the way he rests when he is tired, and eats when he is hungry, and knows, with the bone-deep wisdom of those who have learned from blisters, that tomorrow's endurance is paid for by tonight's sleep. When he returns, the town looks unchanged, but doorways breathe easier. and the strange weight that made conversation hurry has gone to ground. Everybody senses the difference without needing to point at it. Courage can be a mirror too, smooth and obliging, held at the right angle to make hard looking possible. Perseus learns this in a room where an elder polishes bronze with a circle of wool, and the room smells faintly of metal and lamb's milk soap. There is a creature over there in the story, yes, but we keep the lamp on the mirror because that is the handwork worth learning. When he borrows it, he thanks the hand that lends it, and he repeats the thanks when he returns it, because a tool that went out and came back deserves ceremony. On the road, he practices. He learns how to angle reflection so it tells the truth without startling him. He learns that looking indirectly is not cowardice but craft. When the time comes to do the hard part, his pulse remembers the practice and the practice remembers the pulse, and the two move together like a pair long trained to pass a picture without spilling. Later, the mirror will hang in a hallway and be used for ordinary checks. Does the cloak sit straight? Is there flour on my cheek? And nobody will guess that it once helped a man keep his head while keeping his head. Thread saves lives more often than sword, if you count entirely. Theseus proves this with a gesture so homely it becomes luminous. He takes a little ball of string and ties it to a doorpost with a knot he trusts. In our telling, the labyrinth does not menace so much as confuse. Floors curve where they should have understood corners. Corridors behave like polite cousins who sometimes forget your name. The hero breathes, feels his shoulders soften, touches the thread. He goes forward, and the thread remembers what he cannot, which is the entire map at once. A friend gave him that thread. He whispered his thank you while the market was loud so the words could travel privately. When courage feels like a rival, he holds the string and remembers he will also need courage that feels like return. Later, after effort we describe here only as sweat, he follows the cord's small wisdom home, and somewhere a loom, hearing the story, hums with satisfaction. A good knot, a good line, a good friend. This is the plain arithmetic of being saved. Odysseus, who travels with an admirable supply of patience, measures courage in oar strokes. The ship is not dramatic. It is broad and useful, the kind of hull you can love without praising it to strangers. In the mornings, the deck smells like rope and yesterday's sun. Oars lift and set with the rhythm of a creature breathing well. The sea, having decided for today to be reasonable, nods under the planks as though agreeing to a conversation it can keep. The captain walks the length of the ship like someone checking a sleeping child's room. Is the blanket in place? Is the window latched against draughts? Is the quiet the right kind of quiet? He speaks to his crew as if speaking to equals were the only sensible habit, which it is. He carries maps in his mind and on wax tablets, and also on the faces of men who have sailed here before. They make a chart together any morning they must choose, and then they choose. When wind misbehaves, they lean into prudence. When chance offers an island with shade and a reliable spring, they accept with courtesy and thank the day for letting them deserve it. What dangers do we name, here where the body seeks rest? Only those that will not startle the heart. A song that asks a man to forget himself becomes, at this distance, the temptation to make ease into a permanent address. He listens respectfully, then keeps rowing, which is a way of remembering his address is somewhere else. A creature who insists on eating guests learns, gently but firmly, that hospitality isn't optional. A weather system gets overexcited. The ship lowers its expectations and rides the hour with the grace of furniture that refuses to tip. In each case, the fix is old-fashioned. Preparation, the right rope, the right words, the right measure of time. When finally the prow turns toward the harbour he has been dreaming, Odysseus does not yell land like a boy. He inhales, marks the angle of the sun against the white wall of the town, and adjusts the rudder by the width of a fingertip. Home is steadying, not spectacular. If these travellers share a virtue, it's the art of packing. Perseus carries a mirror and manners. Theseus secures thread and gratitude. Heracles takes straps that won't betray him. Odysseus inventories words the way other men count arrows. To watch them is to be reminded that bravery is a kit. The pieces are not glamorous. A cloak that sheds light rain. a second pair of laces, a spare wick for the lamp, dried figs and a wedge of cheese wrapped in oiled cloth, a water skin that knows it is precious. A little image for luck carved from olive wood, rubbed smooth on nights when the air speaks in larger syllables than a man would prefer. They go equipped, which is another way of saying they go kindly, toward themselves, toward their companions, toward the day. Sometimes the work is simply hearing the right voice among many. A market can sound like 10 ideas trying to happen at once. A harbour can whistle 3 kinds of wind from 3 corners of the map. A crossroads carries rumours in both directions, and rumours weave shawls that sometimes fit and sometimes do not. The heroes in our quiet chorus learn to listen like bakers, nose, eyes, hands, and when they answer it is without drama. "Not today," says one to a temptation that looks like a shortcut. "Not yet," says another to a fight posing as a conversation. "Now," says a third to a fear that has shrunk to the size where it can be held. And on days when listening is heavy, they borrow a trick from Athena and move to the shade before deciding anything important. Shade has opinions worth hearing. Between departure and return there is the middle, which does not always get its stories told. The middle is damp socks hung at the end of a long day. It is a gnat that insists on diplomacy, and a patch of road that never quite remembers to stop being uphill. It is the way men, clumsy at first, learn to keep step because keeping step saves breath. It is cards turned wood brown by the palms of a crew that has discovered jokes only work if everyone is allowed to be the clever one. The middle is where songs are invented, and where the joke about the captain's famous caution becomes a compliment you can't say at full volume. It's also where a quiet man becomes the one you hand the helm to because his hands remember steadiness. The middle makes the ending deserve its name. Hospitality goes with them like a household god tucked into a corner of the pack. They receive it when a stranger offers water before questions. They give it when a stranger arrives dusty and clearly in need of the stool in the shade. It looks like ordinary service. A cup filled to the proper mark, bread cut cleanly so it does not crumble, the basin set under the spout so no precious water goes wandering. On the road, being kind enlarges a man without making his shadow proud. When they leave, the travellers step back through the doorway and say the small blessing that thanks a threshold for holding. You might think all this ceremony slows them down. It does. In the same way, tying your sandals slows you down, briefly, and to the benefit of your feet. There are maps on paper and maps in the body. Odysseus reads both. He knows the glow that gathers low on the horizon when a town has kept its lamps and its promises. He recognises by taste the wind that has already visited 3 islands today. He can tell by the way the oars want to rise whether the men are ready for a longer pull or a shorter one. And he keeps a human chart too, the one that marks who has family in this port and who should be allowed the first letters home. In the end, good captains are archivists of the present. They keep the ledgers people actually live by. If they sometimes adjust a plan to make room for a kindness, they call that seamanship with a straight face and are correct. You might ask what fear looks like under our lamp. It is smaller than the versions on theatre walls, but more useful. It sits in the belly like a knot someone tied too hard. It blurs the horizon by 1/2 inch. It makes the night louder behind the ear. The cure is mostly work. Breathe into the knot, it loosens. Pick a near landmark and walk to it. The horizon remembers how to be dependable. Turn your head so the loud night becomes ordinary night. The ear gives up its dramatics and goes back to being a good neighbour. Fear shrinks when a pack sits right, when a boat is trimmed, when a friend speaks the line you have given him permission to speak. You're fine. We're here. Eat something. If miracles happen, they tend to be these. At a fork in the path, Theseus writes a small sign for those behind him. Not a boast, just an arrow and the honest word passable. He leaves a sprig of green tucked into the bark of a tree and wipes his knife on his cloak with the satisfaction of someone who has done enough for one day. A mile back, a shepherd sees the sign and adjusts his route and arrives home on time. He lifts his child without realizing he's lifting the continuance of a hero's echo. Few songs are sung for such moments. They aren't particularly photogenic. But they are the precise points where one person's steadiness becomes a community's ease. Perseus visits a market on the way home and spends a coin on a new strap to replace one that frayed under long use. The shopkeeper chats about whether in that gentle, expert tone merchants are born knowing. The hero smiles, nods at the sky, declines a discount, and jokes that the strap will help him carry stories without dropping them. The shopkeeper laughs because this is not the worst definition of a strap he has heard. Transaction completed, they stand a short moment longer because sometimes commerce is just an excuse for a blessing to find a place to land. Heracles passes a threshold at dusk and the dog does not bark as long as usual. Dogs understand a man who has been moving in the company of weather and effort. He rests his club by the door and sits on the step and lets his breath become ordinary again. A neighbour brings a bowl with stew that has learned patience from a slow fire. He says thank you without lifting his eyes all the way, the politely private thank you shared by tired people. Later, when he rises and stretches and goes to wash his hands, the water in the basin accepts dirt the way a story accepts exaggeration. Indulgently, with the knowledge that tomorrow everyone will be clean again. Sailors carry pockets full of small beliefs. A coin turned a certain way when passing the spit of rock where gulls heckle even on holy days. A piece of string knotted with the left hand and then the right. A word said before dawn begins to show its mind. Odysseus indulges these as long as they harm no one and steal no time from safety, because culture, like rope, is stronger with more strands in it. He has his own small rituals, a hand on the mast before sleeping, a moment at the bow testing the air with his face as if it were a liquid he could learn to read, a glance back at the wake to see whether the boat is writing a sentence or a sigh. These are not superstitions so much as ways of speaking to a world that sometimes answers. There are reunions, too, which we will not amplify beyond the hour, doors that remember the step of a returning foot, chairs that make a little sound because the man is heavier in the right places now, the places that speak of work well done. Women who have kept households as if each room were a minor god deserving respect, who now pour water and say nothing so the talk can come back at its own pace. Children who have learned to be taller in a father's absence, and now practice being smaller again, which is a kindness to everybody's heart. And the dog, who was sure all along that patience is a kind of muscle, and that this house has been exercising it. In these homes, stories are mended on the table the way fishermen mend nets, with attention, with a clear eye for holes, with a willingness to pull the line back through and tighten it until it holds. A hero will speak, catch himself shaping the tale to please the lamp and laugh. He will unsay a flourish that does not belong and replace it with the quieter truth that does. The people listening are grateful. Night sits with them like an aunt who enjoys the company. Bread breaks along its seam. Wine learns again how not to be greedy. Courage relaxes into its true shape, which is a person who made it back carrying everything that mattered and none of the weight that did not. You may notice that praises are moderate. Well done, someone says, for coming home with more patience than you left with. Well done, says another, for returning the tool you borrowed. Well done, says a third, for leaving the gate how you found it. The applause is in the chores that go on as they did before, the clean shirt laid out before sleep, the pot washed and turned mouth down, the wick trimmed so the lamp will wake agreeable. If there is music, it is the kind of tune a man hums while storing his gear, a song that is mostly gratitude with a good walking beat. Where do you keep what you've learned? In the hands, mostly. The hands know before the mind has time to write it down. They reach for the right knot without searching. They settle the oar in the water as if greeting a friend. They find the thread in a pocket where you did not think you'd put it, and yet of course you did. Some goes into the eyes, which begin to notice the shade of cloud that means wait 1 hour. Some goes into the mouth, which learns to say the sentence that keeps a group from becoming an argument. Some goes into the back, which knows now how to lift the big thing without hurting the small person who must lift a different big thing tomorrow. When stories travel, they shave themselves to fit in a pocket. The town 2 valleys over hears that Heracles moved a river and calls it a myth. The neighbour who watched him divert a stream with a stubborn row of stones, and a day's steady labour calls it Tuesday. The sailor in the next port is told Odysseus tied a giant wind into a bag. The crewman who knotted a sail to keep a squall from mischief calls it standard good sense. These gaps between version and memory are not lies. They are the polite clothing experience puts on when it goes out. At home, among people who know where the splinters came from, the stories wear their work clothes, and that is perfect. The night makes a different sound when a journey ends. It clicks. The door settles in its frame. The ladder on its peg says, "Yes, that's where I belong." A cat who has watched everything without comment sighs and rearranges the mathematics of her curl. The bed takes the shape of the returning back with a kindness that can feel like weeping if you aren't ready for it. The traveller lies there listening to the house remind itself to be a house, and the house, recognising him again, obliges with creaks in the right places and silence in the rest. Outside, the fig tree practices giving shade to tomorrow. We have not said much about monsters, which is not to deny their occasional existence. We have preferred to point at the tools that made them manageable, keep the mirror polished, carry thread, wrap the handle, know your oar. There is a dignity in such instructions that resists drama, and because it resists drama, encourages sleep. If you need one more, take this. Before you set out, sit. Let the day sit with you. When it is ready, it will stand, and so will you. A hero is just a person who listens when the day clears its throat. At last, return to the opening texture. Cord between finger and thumb. The knot you tied this morning is still holding. The pack sits where you left it, less heavy now that its contents are stories instead of gear. The cup, washed, waits upside down on the board. The Laurel, watered, nods with that peppery breath it likes to share with those who notice it. Somewhere a boat slides along its mooring and makes the little sound that means contentment. If you were to reach out and touch the lamp, it would answer the way a friend answers when you press a hand to their shoulder. Present, warm, not surprised to be needed. Tomorrow there will be other tasks and other roads and maybe a string to wind again on the way to a doorway that asks to be found. For now, let the heroes keep their beds. Let the oars sleep in their brackets. Let the mirror catch moonlight only enough to understand its own curve. You too have travelled and returned, even if your feet never left the room. The thread runs from this moment back to the door where you began, and if you tug it gently you can feel the whole evening hum. That is courage too, the courage to stop. The room agrees, the lamp softens, the story settles beside you like a cloak someone has warmed by the fire, and draped over your shoulders without saying a word. Begin with a doorway that knows it is important. The threshold is swept. A sprig of laurel hangs where air can brush it. A clay lamp rests on a niche like a small attentive sun. You pause, because doors in Greek stories like it when you pause, and you touch the wood with the back of your fingers as if testing the temperature of a bath. On the other side is a room you have not yet seen. Perhaps it holds an answer. Perhaps it holds a better question. Either way, this is the business of oracles and endings, passing from one room to the next without letting the draught snuff the light. The path to Delphi climbs at a pace that makes conversation breathe between sentences. Pine leans in with cool counsel. Time makes the air taste organised. Stones step upward in a pattern your shoes accept as reasonable. Even before the first column appears, the place announces itself with the tone good kitchens and good libraries share. A hum that has nothing to prove. At the centre of this high settlement sits the omphalos, a carved stone that behaves like a polite paperweight for the world. People touch it lightly, as you would touch a friend's shoulder to say, "I'm here." A little farther on, set at the heart like a kettle on a steady ring of heat, waits the tripod. The tripod is bronze and exact. 3 legs, 3 small statements of competence. Over it, the air feels stroked by warm breath. Laurel wreaths rest nearby, their peppery scent rising whenever a hand brushes them. The priestess, Pythia to those who know the house rules, keeps company with this seat. She is not distant tonight. She is a woman who has learned the art of stillness in a room that kindly insists on it. People come in bearing worries wrapped like loaves. Harvest, voyage, marriage. The useful handful of questions that build a life. They bring honey cakes and a coin with a history. They wash their hands in a basin that reflects a small sky. They breathe once, twice, and then they ask. Asking is an art here. You do not set your question down like a bundle in a crowded lane and expect it to remain tidy. You unfold it. You smooth its edges. You remove the pieces that are really complaints disguised as puzzles. The oracle likes a question that sits up straight. A farmer, wise with seasons, might say, "If the rain remembers us, shall I plant early barley?" A sailor trained by wind might ask, "If the moon behaves, May we hug the coast? Even lovers, those ambitious architects of tomorrow, learn to propose questions with hinges. If trust is patient, one asks, how long is patient? The Pythia listens and the room listens with her. When the answer arrives, it wears two garments, the one you can see at once and the one you understand later while washing up. The first might be a phrase that behaves like a fence, guiding your footsteps without making you feel fenced. The second is a knot you will learn to untie while the lamp is low, a knot that reveals it was, in fact, a bow. Go by the long road, which is shorter, says the voice in the warm laurel-scented air. Obvious? Not until you try the short one and meet every cart in the valley. Marry when the vineyard finishes its first song, murmurs another answer. You wait for the leaves to whisper the right shade of green, and the wedding bread rises as if it has been paying attention in temple. There is a joke here, a soft one, and Delphi tells it without smirking. Prophecy is a mirror that prefers good lighting. It shows you what you bring, refined by a room that has practiced clarity for generations. The priestess is not a vending machine for destinies. She is an invitation to your own carefulness. The Greeks understood the charm of this arrangement. They garlanded it, kept it tidily mysterious, and printed it on the coinage of their daily thinking. Know thyself, someone carved near the threshold. A statement that passes for thunder in a room that refuses to shout. Another carving. Nothing in excess, reads like a friend who folds your cloak for you and sets it where you can find it later. Not every oracle speaks from a mountain. Far to the northwest there is an oak that has listened so long it creaks in complete sentences. At Dodona, people ask their questions in the language of leaves. The breeze replies, stitch, whisper, hush, and priests trained in the grammar of rustle give an answer that sounds like rain, learning to pronounce your name. A traveller writes his worry on a lead tablet and tacks it to a wall that looks like a quilt of human hesitations. The oak continues its long conversation with weather. The travellers continue theirs with themselves, now improved by the tree's patience. Back in town, where not every day contains a pilgrimage, questions find smaller rooms. A house shrine stands near the door, a little shelf that behaves like a neighbour who always answers on the second knock. There might be a figure in clay, a dish for a few clean leaves, a tiny wreath that looks like a bracelet someone made for the wall. Here too, people ask, and here too the form matters. Should I take the stall beside the basket maker, a woman wonders, thumb rubbing flour into comfort. Will the child do better with numbers if we make a game of them? A father asks the ceiling, which has heard stranger things. A wick trims to a better point. The kettle whispers readiness. The answer, when it comes, is most often the next useful task. Visit the market early, turn counting into shell piles. Look again at the linen fund, step out now, the breeze is on your side. Ritual is simply a habit we remember to honour. The Greeks kept many small ones, domestic as the sound of a broom. A man sets down a loaf and breaks the heel to thank a goddess who likes being remembered over bread. A woman, finished with her calculations, touches the laurel by the window and gives the day its grade. Well managed, room for improvement, or let's agree never to do that again. They pour a first sip for the gods and the thirsty ground, and if you listen you can hear the little laugh that says the earth was thirsty for the respect as much as for the wine. No thunder attends these gestures, which is precisely the point. The quiet makes room for meaning to arrive in house shoes. Even sacrifices, so large in the older tellings, shrink here to kindly scales. A honey cake instead of a goat, a strand of hair for the safe voyage, tied to an oar notch that already knows the work, a pinch of salt tossed toward the protective sea. The smell is spice and warmth. Children watch and learn where to stand and how to hold a bowl so sweetness remembers to behave. The lesson is not that the gods eat, it is that gratitude wants a body, and a slice of something good is a graceful one. When counsel fails or is not attempted, when questions are mistakes instead of beginnings, endings arrive with their own doors. We go to meet them as we meet the evening, choosing a cup, straightening the lamp, putting the chair where it will be needed. The Greeks arranged an underworld to make sense of the most mysterious door of all. They built it from river sounds and quiet benches, from clerks with tidy hands and fields that keep their promises. You can enter this imagining without fear. The lamp comes with us. The threshold approves. At the river, choose the one that matches your mood. There are several. The water's voice sets the tone. There is the Lethe, whose syllables smooth the day's noise until you can rest. There is the Mnemosyne, mother of muses, who helps you remember the tune you loved without burdening you with the whole parade of verses. There is the Acheron, honest about sorrows, who suggests you name them and then set them down in places sorted by colour. Styx, the Oath River, runs sternly in the distance like a clerk who insists on signatures. The gods favour it because oaths deserve a river that refuses to joke. If all these streams sound like metaphors with excellent posture, well, they are. The afterlife in this account is a mood board for courage. The ferryman's name is Charon, and he appreciates exact change because exactness is a kindness to any job. His boat is practical, scuffed into that kind of cleanliness only long use can polish. He does not require you to be interesting, he requires you to be present. People step aboard like patrons at a small library where voices keep to a volume that respects paper. The crossing is short, just long enough to notice that silence, when well made, has texture. The shore on the far side accepts your feet with the competence of a floor that knows it is a floor. What waits is not cruelty. Think of a civic office with better lighting and helpful signage, where the queue curves in a way that suggests someone who cared about the shape of waiting. 3 judges sit at a desk whose wood has learned wisdom from elbows. Minos, Rhadamanthus, Iacchus. Their pens all work. They listen as good bakers listen to dough. They are not here to scold, they are here to sort. If your days added up to gentleness more often than not, your path wanders toward fields that grow shade the way a friendly conversation grows time. If you need a spell of quiet to remember how to be yourself, kindly meadows oblige. And if you tried hard and made a mess and then tried hard again, well, there's a place for workers too. The Elysian breeze understands effort and its right to a hammock. Elsewhere, in corners we won't explore long, penalties happen to those who loved harm for its own sake. Even there, myth prefers craft to spectacle. Sisyphus works under the supervision of gravity and an excellent hill. Tantalus stands at a buffet that teaches the ethics of appetite by withholding. We will not dwell. Our lamp is for passageways, not punishments. We nod at the idea that choices matter, as doorways matter, and we continue toward the rooms where most souls live ordinary, decent afterlives, which is to say, more benches, more low talk, more chance meetings with people who once sold you good olives at a fair price, and are pleased to see you still like them. Some say that poets and musicians find a special grove where the air hums in their preferred key, and there they keep coaxing beauty into the shape of listening. Children, mercifully free of earthly errands, chase one another between trees that were planted to teach shade how to be playful. Craftsmen discover workshops that carry every tool in just the drawer where their hands expect it. In all these places a rule applies that would have pleased Hestia. Every lamp is trimmed, every kettle knows when to hush, every threshold has learned the gentle trick of welcoming feet without clinging to heels. The living visit the idea of this realm more often than they admit. They sit at dusk on the step and practice being quiet in ways that look suspiciously like rehearsal. They sort their own papers so the clerks will have less to do later. They tell a true story about themselves in a single honest sentence, the kind that would fit neatly on a small tablet of lead, and then they let it dry in the air. To live with an underworld arranged by order and courtesy is to live better above ground. It makes you trim the wick. It teaches you to carry a coin for ferrymen, which is to say, be ready to pay attention. If oracles are doors you open by asking, and the underworld is a door you open by being mortal, then rituals are the doors you open by habit. After a long day, a man touches the lintel and says thanks to the wood for remaining a lintel. A child sets a fig on the house shrine because generosity must practice when appetites are small. A woman blesses a jug by tapping it lightly with the back of a spoon, which is not standard procedure anywhere except in a kitchen, where such taps have lined up to become a litany. These gestures accuse no one of magic. They merely assert that attention is the oldest kindness. What about dreams, those night oracles that break the seal without appointments? The Greeks gave them a small postbox of their own. You lie down with a sprig of bay near the bed to lend the night a voice you respect. The room darkens in the precise way that assures you the lamp will remember to be the first thing you see if you half wake. The dream arrives wearing recent events as disguise. Your cousin is there, and your teacher, and a fish market rearranged into a theatre lobby. But underneath the costume you recognise the script. Speak slower, write the letter, mend the fence, apologise while the bread is still warm. You make a note on a shard of pottery at morning, just enough to carry the advice into daylight, and break your fast with the satisfaction of someone who has already acted once today. In sanctuaries and kitchens alike, the body participates. Oracles are not abstractions, they are choreography. At Delphi, you wash your hands, crown yourself with leaves, step toward warmth. At home, you rinse a cup, set a crumb aside, move the stool so the elder does not have to ask. The Greeks understood that a mind will follow a body into reverence. They taught the feet to slow, the fingers to place, the breath to lengthen. Then the thoughts, like well-trained guests, arrived at the pace of the host. It is tempting to say that answers were better then. They were not. They were simply shorter, and because they were shorter, they called out the best in the listener. Consider the farmer who hears. Follow the swallow. He watches the bird hop along the furrow and realises it is pointing at a patch that warms earlier, drains better, will forgive a late frost. Consider the sailor who is told, trust the oar, not the echo. He recalls a cove that sounds friendly but lifts hidden chop. He rows on past it and finds the quiet water beyond. Consider the pair who ask whether their love can excuse their haste, and receive only a glance at the laurel wreaths. They count to 7 days, and when they do marry, their patience has already built a room for them to live in. Sometimes the answer is no, wrapped as a later. The oracle is kind enough to know the difference. Not this season, she might say, and in the saying she lends you a season's worth of grace. You grow strong where you stand. You gather better tools. You learn, while not doing the thing you wanted to do, the things you will wish you had known on the first day of doing it. A year later, the same question appears as if it had never met you. You nod and introduce yourselves properly. It is not the same meeting. You have a new handshake. The door you were meant to open has been oiled by time. If oracles teach the phrasing of questions, the afterlife teaches the maintenance of consequences. A man who on earth kept his accounts square, and his laughter untidy, discovers in the meadows that both qualities matter. The books are easy to audit. The jokes find an audience. A woman who held her family together with linen and logic is assigned a bench near the path where new arrivals stumble. Her job is to smile without rushing them, which turns out to be the skill she loved best already. Children, as always, are appointed to the task of reminding serious people that seriousness is only one part of the recipe. On festival days, the dividing line between rooms becomes thinner, as it does when a house is at its best. Processions move through streets that know how to echo without shouting. Laurel and ivy argue amiably above doorways. Statues get their yearly bath and somehow look less stern with clean ankles. In the theatre, invented perhaps for exactly this purpose, masks allow the living to try on the large faces and return them at curtain, with the satisfaction of having held a weight and not dropped it. Plays end with a gentler world than the one that walked in. People clap for the actors, yes, and also for the idea that the gods and the mortals have remembered their conversation. There is always a person who claims oracles are tricks, and afterlives are furniture for fear. He's invited to supper anyway, because Zanaya doesn't require agreement, only manners. Over lentils that have learned the correct texture, he confesses that he still touches the lintel when a day takes something from him, and everyone nods because doors are doors whether or not you publish in them. He leaves with a small loaf for the road, and the house falls quiet with the good fatigue of a job done decently. In the end, what these rooms offer is not control but coordination. You ask well. The world answers in its shy, generous dialects. You carry the answer in your hands and your habits. You accept endings without pretending they are failures. You arrange your days as if someone you admire might visit and sit at your table, and approve of the way you set the cup on the saucer without clatter. The gods, if they come, and they often do when the floor is swept and the lamp behaves, find you doing the ordinary things that make a life agreeable on both sides of the river. Night gathers its phrasing again. The laurel by the window has released a last peppery sigh. The lamp has settled into that sweet spot between boast and whisper. If you have a question left over, it is probably small enough to tuck under your tongue until morning. The tripod at Delphi holds its patient heat. The oak at Dodona still knows all the verbs for wind. The ferryman sits on his bench, polishing the oar's grip because polish is kindness to hands. The clerk's pens are capped. The meadows are reclining. Somewhere a judge straightens a stack of papers he will not need. A gesture so human it almost calls you back to laugh. You don't. You let the door close softly. Lie back and picture, if you like, the omphalos, the hearthstone of the world, wearing its crown of fingerprints. Picture the house shrine's dish catching moonlight like milk. Picture a lead tablet on which a stranger has scratched a concern that sounds a little like yours, and the steady knowledge, more comforting than proof, that 1,000 hands have steadied that same wall. The rooms wait, the doors remember, the lamp keeps the promise, and when sleep arrives, quiet, sure-footed, you will pass through it like a well-trained guest, leaving your sandals straight on the mat and your question, for now, content to be a small stone that warms in the palm. Begin with the kind of glow our age understands, a screen dim to night mode, a rectangle of soft light hovering over your hands like a considerate moth. You can feel the world asking you to scroll, but tonight you ask it to breathe. You set the device face down and the room inhales. Nearby a plant you forgot to name practices being Laurel, shiny, pepper sweet if you rub a leaf. The window is a square of patient darkness. Somewhere a kettle performs its quiet rising note. We live with different objects than the ancients did, but the rituals feel familiar if you tilt your head. A lamp is a lamp, whether it drinks olive oil or electricity. A threshold is a threshold, whether it's stone worn smooth by sandals or a doormat that insists on catching every leaf. The night is still the night, and it still prefers good manners. In the old stories, Hermes ran the messages. He laced his sandals, tested the air, and arrived exactly when the moment tipped toward now. In the modern version, your phone pings. Timing wears a new costume but keeps the same job. You can grant Hermes a small victory by taming the noise. Flip the switch that says "Do Not Disturb," which is the electronic spelling of kindly later. He will not be offended. Hermes understands the dignity of a closed door. In that hush, other presences step forward in their present-day disguises. Athena still loves a plan. She just happens to enjoy a spreadsheet. Apollo still keeps time. He likes your calendar's neat rectangles. Hephaestus has traded bellows for a toolbox tucked under the sink. Hestia has learned to hum through radiator fins and the kitchen's hood fan. The gods do what they have always done, tune the house to comfort, and we, grateful, pretend it's all our idea. You can assemble an altar out of everyday things. Not a grand altar, no carved marble, no complicated incense, just a square foot of counter you keep deliberately tidy. A cup sits there waiting for water, because Demeter still believes in thirst and its orderly relief. A bowl holds bread or the closest available cousin, a heel of yesterday's loaf, a biscuit, a cracker that makes a polite sound when broken. Beside it, a page from a notebook waits with a pencil. The page is not for resolutions. It is for gratitude in lowercase, 2 or 3 words only. Warm socks, safe train, friendly cashier. The gods accept such notes as payment in full. If they want more, they nudge you tomorrow by arranging a coincidence at the exact hour you would have been ready for it anyway. Hermes is very good at coincidences. Take the room's temperature in moral degrees. That's a dramatic way of asking. Have you made space for patients to sit down? Straighten a chair? Move a book from the floor to the table? Wipe the circle a cup left the last time you forgot the coaster? These gestures don't change the news, or your inbox, or the price of anything. They do change your posture. The body likes order more than it admits. It recognizes an invitation when you open a path from door to window, and ask the air to travel it without bumping into shoes. The ancients garlanded thresholds. You merely rescue yours from a pile of mail. Even that is a kind of genia, a welcome you offer the night itself. Come in, it hears. Walk safely. Please don't trip. At some point, this is almost guaranteed, your brain will try to hold court. It will seat every thought that thinks it deserves a question mark. Sleep makes its case. Your brain objects. The kettle calls for decorum. Let the myths take the bench. Picture the 3 judges of the underworld, only now their pens are a pen, a spoon, and a phone set to silent. Minos, who has the face of your favourite teacher, asks which thought has evidence. Rhadamanthus, who would have made a very good tax preparer, asks which thought is really just a recurring expense. Acus, whose eyebrows do most of his speaking, points one bristled line at the bed. You present your worries like documents. They stamp the few that matter and send the rest to the tomorrow pile with a firmness that feels like mercy. If you need a prophecy, the modern world provides 1,000, most of them noisy. Ads promise you better mornings if you buy the correct mug. Articles announce destinies in fonts that fret. That is not Delphi. Delphi would invite you to rephrase. Take your biggest question and give it a smaller chair. What should I do with my life becomes, what can I do kindly before breakfast? How will I keep everyone safe becomes, who needs water right now? The laurel by the window shifts a leaf as if to say exactly. The answer that arrives may be embarrassingly simple, which is how you know it's from a sane source. Text the friend back. Put the letter in the mailbox, soak the beans. Plug in the thing that has been blinking at 5%. The sacred is often low voltage and steady current. There are still monsters, of course, but they respect lamplight. The minotaur you meet at midnight is a laundry pile in a dark chair. Switch on the light. The monster folds into sweaters. Medusa lives in the bathroom mirror after a rough day. Tilt the glass the way Perseus tilted his bronze and catch the reflection at a kinder angle. Sirens sing from tabs left open on your laptop. Odysseus believes in you, and also recommends the browser's Close All command, which is a 21st century version of wax in the ears. It's not that the myths were literal, it's that they were practical before our tools changed their uniforms. Travel happens still, even when the farthest distance is the length of a thought crossing from worry to rest. If you do have to cross a city or a sea tomorrow, pack like a hero. Thread? A charger cord coiled neatly with a band. Mirror? A phone set to airplane mode that becomes an actual mirror, good enough for checking whether the person in it looks like someone you would trust to make the next decision. Provisions? The last portion of fruit you meant to eat earlier, plus a square of something sweet to bribe the part of you that resists schedules. A small token for luck. A transit card kept in the same pocket as always, a ticket folded once, a coin from a country where you once stood and thought the sky had new ideas about blue. Heroes, we have said, pack well. So do travellers who want a nap later. It is at heart the same skill. In workplaces, the gods have learned to share cubicles. Apollo handles the calendar and the meeting that ends on time because someone loved the agenda. Athena writes the outline nobody will see, but everyone will feel, because it fixes a tangle without needing credit. Hephaestus keeps the hinge on the office door from squeaking, and the kitchen tap from sulking. Demeter protects lunches from the tragedy of mislabeling, and the comedy of forgetting the spoon. Hermes delivers good tidings in small packages. The email that reads no rush. The colleague who says, I already did the thing. The traffic signal that forgives your nearly late morning. Hestia, bless her, lives in the warm spot where the sunlight lands on the carpet at 2 o'clock, and in the absurdly comforting hum of the copy machine when it behaves. If a workplace lacks these presences, it becomes a maze. When they are present, even a long afternoon becomes walkable. Love keeps practicing too, with fewer marble statues and more laundry baskets. Aphrodite trusts you with ordinary tenderness, a hand on the back as someone passes behind your chair, a glass of water placed within reach during a long call, the sentence, text me when you get home, which is a modern amulet that works as well as any ancient thread. Eros and Psyche translate beautifully to a world with dimmers. Don't turn everything on at once. Let trust arrive at the speed of breath. Check the recipe together before the oven preheats. The biggest romance may be between you and your own life. It starts, like all sensible romances, with noticing this cup, this chair, this lamp, and admitting you enjoy their company. If you live alone, the house is still a chorus. Furniture remembers you the way altars remembered fingerprints. The good plate lights up when you choose it on a weekday. The shelf that sags agrees to stop sagging if you move the heavy books a little to the left and place a plant there to supervise. The rug forgives the shoe you didn't remove because you were busy remembering something important. If you do not live alone, the chorus grows lively. You learn the ritual of the shared kitchen. the dance of stepping aside with exactly the inches the other person needs, the blessing of a knife returned clean, the sacrament of the shared salt. You will have your theatre days, masks, lines, a small argument about who left the wet towel where the towel did not want to live. But even those end with a curtain, and the house reverts to the low hum of competence. Cities, with their glitter and their stubbornness, remain mythic landscapes. You cross them on trains that breathe like low dragons with very good manners, and at certain stations you can feel a story climb on board. The river you pass twice a day is the same river, but not the same mood. And if Poseidon wanted to make a point, he would do it by arranging reflections, not waves. Markets still teach hospitality. The vendor who hands you one extra herb for luck is a priest in a different uniform. The barista who remembers your name keeps a ledger much like Zeus's, only all the entries rhyme with foam. The theatre you pass on the corner, posters bright in a light drizzle, reminds you why masks were invented. To try on some other courage for 2 hours and bring home a small piece that fits your own face. On hard days, when the news sounds like Ari's clipping his nails too loudly, shrink the battlefield to a room you can win. Wash a plate, sweep a square metre of floor, tie back your hair. Athene approves of small victories because they breed larger ones. When the world feels tilted, put a book under the short leg of the table. The table stops wobbling. The cup stops complaining. You sit. Courage doesn't have to be a speech. Most days it's a steadying hand on furniture. Let's talk about the body, which remembers more myths than it tells. Sleep is a ritual as old as any. You can perform it with props that look suspiciously like the ones in museums, and not at all like museum pieces. A linen pillowcase, a blanket with weight but not argument, a window left open the width of a fox. Artemis appreciates your commitment to air. The pre-sleep bath that used to happen in courtyards now happens in a tub, and the candle that would have warned a passing god of your presence is replaced by the civilized click of a switch. Stretch once, twice, in shapes named for animals who are here before myths and will be here after them. Light flexes, joints whisper. Your body says thank you without needing to speak. If your mind wanders backward to old mistakes, send it to the meadows. The underworld in our kinda map has benches for reviewing without punishing. Sit there in imagination. Picture clerks who never roll their eyes. Let a gentle judge ask, what was the promise? And did you forget it? And can you keep a better one now? You will be tempted to perform a play in which you are both hero and chorus. Resist. Pick one line to say out loud, the smallest true sentence. I was tired. I hurried. I wanted to be chosen. From there, make the smallest true repair. Write the email. Place the alarm. Put the tool where future you would prefer to find it. The meadows are patient. They will let you come and go as often as necessary. No ferry required. A day also likes omens, but gentle ones. A sparrow that chooses your balcony rail for its noon meeting means eat something green. A train that arrives with exactly the sound you expected means trust the plan. A colleague's unexpected kindness means continue. If you need a ritual to notice these, invent one. Tap the doorframe twice before leaving, once when you return. Carry a coin that reminds you of a lake. Set your keys in the same bowl and bless the bowl occasionally with the high ceremony of a damp cloth. Human beings are rung like bells by repeated gestures. Ring yourself into steadiness. There will be festivals, even if they are small. A friend passes an exam. A child discovers that letters become words and words consent to tell jokes. You make a soup that behaves like a seasoned choir. Mark it. Light the third best candle. Wear the shirt that feels like a quiet award. Invite 2 people or send a message that is the modern version of a procession. Line of text, line of text. A small icon of a laurel wreath. If nobody is available, celebrate with the house. The house never minds being the audience. It is very good at applause that sounds like the lid of a pot settling in place. And, inevitably, there are days Greco-Roman theatre would have called tragic only because comedy was on lunch break. Something breaks and cannot be mended tonight. Someone you love is far away in a place that refuses to be near. Your own heart pitches questions you cannot brave at full volume. You do not need to be mythic to meet this. Sit with Hestia. Set the kettle on its ring. Warm your hands on a mug. The trick in those moments is not to give speeches to yourself. It's to host yourself. Water, you ask? Bread? Seat? Grief will accept these gifts more often than you think. If a joke wanders in, a very small one, a polite neighbour, let it sit. It will not fix anything. It will remind you your mouth remembers how to lift. Modern oracles also live in paperbacks and streaming lullabies. A poem you bookmarked a decade ago says the line you needed tonight. Clear, unpunctuated, fresh as the first slice of an orange. A song finds your room at exactly the minute when the light along the far wall turns the colour painters keep trying to name. You can, if you like, assign a muse to your algorithm and thank her when she behaves. She will be amused. She likes a grateful human. Tomorrow's work will want to rehearse itself at 3 a.m. You can give it 5 minutes in the hallway. Take a pen and a folded envelope. Write 1 line, 2 at most. The first thing you will do when the morning moves, put the pen away, return to bed. If the work follows you, remind it that the judges stamped it tomorrow, which is an official ruling. On the second reminder, it will obey. Bureaucracy can be a very useful magic when you learn to cast its spells for good. What remains are the constellations, which have not changed their hours. On a clear night you can step outside, balcony, backyard, sidewalk, and look up at the same patient grammar the sailors memorized. You may not know the names, or you may know too many names, which amounts to the same thing. Just pick 3 stars that form an almost triangle. Let them be your private sign. Consider bravery in that small shape. Consider kindness. Consider the joke you will tell tomorrow to the person who most needs a joke. The sky suffers your contemplation gladly. If a neighbour glances up and you meet eyes, nod. Cousins in a very old household, agreeing to keep the lamps lit. Here is the softest truth the myths keep repeating across centuries of furniture and fashion. You become more yourself by learning to be a good host of your guests, yes, and also of your hours. Host the morning by resisting the stampede of tasks. Offer it one. Host the afternoon by giving it water and a stretch. Host the evening by lowering your voice and turning on 1 lamp instead of all of them. Host your sleep by laying out the path. The glass, the book, the switched-off machines, the sprig of something green, the window cracked. Host your future by leaving it a note that says, "Start with this, love." The night thickens. The street outside lowers its volume. 1 last car forgetting it is mortal. A bicycle whispering in spokes. A neighbour's laugh that folds itself and slides under a door without offence. Inside, the plant in the corner settles like a cat deciding this cushion merits long-term interest. You pad to the kitchen. The counter glows with the faintly heroic confidence of a recently wiped surface. You hold the cup to the tap and listen to the trickle become a clean line. Back in the bedroom, the lamp learns your intention and agrees. Lower, lower, there. You could sleep now and you will, but first you glance around and notice the talismans you've accidentally arranged. The coin in the bowl, the folded note by the kettle, the thread of the charger coiled without knots, the laurel leaf on your fingers where you pressed it to smell. We end where the series began, though the room has changed clothes. The olive oil lamp has learned to wear a shade and hide its wire. The courtyard is an apartment balcony with a plastic chair that insists on being comfortable anyway. The lyre is a playlist. The loom is a planner. The oar is the commute you will row without resentment because the ferry keeps decent time. The gods do not appear with special effects. They arrive as a well-timed text, a pot that doesn't boil over, a train that waits an extra second because someone was running. And you, who have listened to their stories, carry them in the stitched-in places, the wrist that reaches for the light and finds it without fumbling, the back that settles because the chair understands its job, the breath that becomes a small regular sea. Turn the lamp 1 notch lower. Let the room keep watch. Outside, a lake cloud plays at being a ship and then admits it is only weather. Inside, the laurel raises its polite peppery flag and then stands at ease. Sleep approaches the way a familiar walks toward a door. No hurry, good footing, a key already in the hand. If you need to bargain, bargain with Hestia. Hold the temperature, you whisper, and I'll keep the cup facing down on the drying rack. She accepts. It is, after all, a fair trade. Close your eyes. If your mind asks for a picture to travel by, give it the old one. A courtyard with an olive lamp. Add a modern kindness. A thick curtain that remembers to buffer sound. a soft plug at the outlet to tame the tiny blue jewel of the charger's eye. The lamp burns on exactly enough. The cup on the table cools exactly enough. The stories, which have walked with you through kitchens and markets and meetings and quiet benches, take off their sandals and sit. They are not in a hurry. They know the way back to the door they came through. When you wake, they'll be waiting in the objects you touch, and the hours you host doing their calm work without announcement. And so, our journey for tonight comes to a quiet close. The story lingers, like the last glow of candlelight, as you drift further into rest. If these gentle wanderings bring you peace, I invite you to like and subscribe so that whenever you wish, you may return and we can travel together once more. For now, dear listener, may your dreams be kind and your night be restful. Until next time,